Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is an odd one, veering from the novel's focus on the son Danny and the effects the Overlook Hotel has on him, to the father's experience with the Overlook, struggling with writer's block and cabin fever, while it tempts him with alcohol, adultery, violence, and status. I can see how this could divide the Shining fan base. You either like this one or the Stephen King TV miniseries. Stephen King has been quite public about his dislike of the Stanley Kubrick adaptation. But hey, Stephen King, what does he know? Personally, the Stanley Kubrick version is my preferred Shining experience. While Stephen King seems to prefer more traditional, spooky, Halloween-type horror, Kubrick brought us a more psychological story, holding up much better than the more novel-accurate miniseries made 17 years later. The appeal for me about Kubrick's films is that I'm going to see something that feels unique, whether that be changes from a novel or a shake-up of the genre itself. When Jack Torrance takes the long, lonely drive up to the Overlook Hotel for the job interview as winter caretaker, he learns about one of the past caretakers who went crazy and killed his family and himself.
Well, you can rest assured, Mr. Ullman, that's not going to happen with me.
When he calls his wife Wendy to let her know he got the job, we also learn the son Danny has psychic powers manifesting through a voice he calls Tony, who his mother thinks is just an imaginary friend. When the family arrives, they get a tour of the hotel as the staff are all packing up to leave for the season. There's a large emphasis on native design and imagery throughout the hotel, and we learn it was built on an Indian burial ground, a little hint into the hotel's troubled history. Meanwhile, Danny talks with Dick Halloran, the hotel chef, who has the same psychic powers Danny has, a power he calls shining, and explains that some places can shine like some people do, meaning the Overlook, and that not everything that's happened there was good. As they get snowed in, the hotel's sinister intentions continue revealing itself to Danny. Jack, who is trying to write a book, gets severe writer's block, increased cabin fever, and eventually manifests the ghosts who keep egging him on to kill his family. Danny manages sending a distress call to Halloran, who does his best to get there in time to help. Finally going mad, it's up to Wendy to protect Danny and stop Jack. Stanley Kubrick disliked traveling to shoot his movies, and The Shining was no exception. All interior scenes, including the hedge maze, were filmed at Elstree and Pinewood Studios, just outside London, and the exterior portion of the hotel was constructed on set as well. A separate unit was in charge of filming establishing shots in Montana, California, New Hampshire, and Colorado. The Timberline Lodge in Mount Hood, Oregon, served as the exterior look of the Overlook, and interior sets were built based on various other hotels around the U.S. The Overlook Hotel is like a character in itself. The sheer size and emptiness of all that space accentuates the feeling of loneliness and cabin fever. Even the long, lonely ride up to the hotel sets up that feeling of isolation before we even get there. The film has an extensive use of Steadicam, which is a far departure from the usual shaky, extreme close-up, headache-inducing camera work of traditional horror films. Would you believe all that snow on the ground in the hedge maze and the hotel exterior is salt? Yeah, that's a lot of salt. And the falling snow is polystyrene flakes. Wendy Carlos's electronic synth music score is eerie and fantastic, and a couple old-time tunes are included when the hotel is transported into the past. A lot of questions are raised when watching The Shining. If there's one thing you get from a Kubrick film, it's definitely viewer interpretation and thought provocation, along with ideas of ESP and the psychological state of characters creating ghosts with physical powers. All of the underlying questions and character actions get scarier the more you think of them. Jack flat out ignores what he sees in room 237, showing that obligations to his employers and the status of being the caretaker of a big-time hotel means more to him than his family's safety. When Grady tells him he's always been the caretaker, is he lying to trick Jack into killing his family? Has Jack been there in a past life, perhaps? Did Jack have an ancestor that worked at the Overlook way back in the 20s? Is the hotel trying to fill itself up with ghostly staff? Grady became a servant. Does it want Jack as the caretaker? Did his psychological state manifest his so-called caretaker status into reality because he wanted it even more than Grady did? Could the fact that the hotel is built on an Indian burial ground have anything to do with it? Perhaps making people go crazy are the spirits of the desecrated native graves' way of getting revenge. Bottom line, the hotel is tricking Jack into giving it his family and himself, while Jack thinks he'll be gaining status. I have to bring up these questions for someone, like myself, who hasn't read the novel, if the novel would answer them at all. I notice early in the film, Jack is not a happy man. He isn't happy in his marriage, and though being a reformed alcoholic who still wants to drink, we learn later in the film he blames Wendy for his troubles. Driving up to the hotel, you can see the annoyance on his face when Wendy speaks to him, and the smile that comes to his face when he tells Danny about the Donner Party. Look at him eyeing the young girls as they leave the hotel, and a ghost has no problem seducing him in room 237. More of his disdain for Wendy comes out in his reaction looking at her after his nightmare. It's almost as if the hotel is helping convince him into following through on thoughts he's had already. A couple other things I noticed. Earlier on, Jack eyes the baseball bat that saves Wendy's life. When Danny/Tony picks up the knife, it looks like he was going to write on the door with blood, but instead finds the lipstick. After Jack blows up at Wendy and storms out, he looks right into the camera. This one's always bugged me. Why the hell does he look into the camera? Overall, The Shining doesn't go for the big boo, make you jump, got you scare, but more of a mess with your head psychological scare. It's an excellent addition to any Halloween viewing lineup.